Welcome to the Pint Glass Football Podcast.
We are excited to be joined by Larry Dyer, the host of the Bears Talk Underground podcast, part of the Radcast Network. It's an award-winning Chicago Bears podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcast. Be sure to check it out if you haven't already. Larry, thanks for being on the show.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, excited to talk about the Bears because this is an exciting team right now. A lot of buzz around this team after their draft class and some of the free agency moves that they've made. Things seem to be moving in the right direction for this franchise. I want to start in the running back room, and I want to start with Kyle Monangai, the rookie out of Rutgers. I want to ask you what you think his fit is going to be in this running back room, and is a guy like this going to be enough, do you think, to solidify that Bears running back room? Now, this is a guy that led the Big Ten with over 2,500 yards rushing in the last 2 years. He runs with a physicality. He's very good in pass protection as well. He could be a steal in this draft, but does he bring what the Chicago Bears need in that backfield rotation?
You know, I believe he does. I think he's a good replacement for Khalil Herbert, who we lost midseason due to a trade with the Bengals. And then we just kind of had this rotating, carousel of guys coming in. Darrington Evans for like his third or fourth stint with the team, and, pulling this guy off the practice squad and this guy off the street after Roschon and DeAndre Swift. And it's, from everything that I've seen, it's like it was lucky that the Bears found him in the 7th round, or that he was still available. I heard he was more like a 4th or 5th round pick kind of guy. And then Ben Johnson is real big on his backs being able to block and help in pass protection. And I just watched a reel earlier today, watching him laying people out, trying to come down the middle on blitzes and things like that. And even though he's a smaller guy, holding his own against them. So as far as like, will he be able to, I'm sure he'll be able to find some time on the field, if for no other reason than because he does the things that Ben Johnson likes his running backs to do.
I'm curious, when you had 3 second-round picks, at any point during that second round, did you expect to get a running back?
Yeah, we kept getting sniped. It looked like Henderson was going to fall in our laps, and then Cleveland, and was it Cleveland? Who took him? 38.
Yeah, it was
just before us. It was Cleveland.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't Cleveland.
No.
Quinshawn. It was the Patriots.
Patriots, yes. They took him at 38, and then we went ahead and took Burden, and then traded out of 41. I think like sometime right before we were going to pick in the 4th round, Scadaboo got picked by the Giants. Then the Bears traded down again. I think it happened one more time, like in the 5th round. There was somebody the Bears were looking at, and the 49ers picked him. So we traded back again and ended up having to, all due respect to the kid, but we had to settle for him in the 7th round. If the Bears were going to address running back, we got sniped in basically just about every round of the draft. We were hoping Genty would fall. That wasn't going to happen. The Raiders got him at 6, hoping Henderson would be there at 41, or maybe he would have been the guy at 39 if the Patriots hadn't taken him. But the Patriots did take him, so he wasn't there, and so on down. And we didn't have a 3rd round pick because of that trade with Buffalo that gave us 3 second-rounders. We had to give up our 3rd to make that deal with them. So we weren't able to try and land like a Caleb Johnson from Iowa in the 3rd round. But when we were ready to pick in the 4th, Scadaboo came off like 2-3 picks before the Bears were able to do it. So it definitely looked like, if you go back and you look at the pattern, like one of the beat writers for the Bears pointed this out on Twitter. It's like, for all the times that Ryan Poles and the Bears traded back, it seemed to happen like right after a running back that maybe was on their radar got picked ahead of them. So it was one of those things where the board just didn't break their way as far as getting the running back that they wanted.
And I agree. You mentioned the name that I was very much interested in, Caleb Johnson, because this is a tough, like, he fits the mantra of Chicago, right? Tough, hard-nosed running back. And then what you did in the offseason, or at center guard, you strengthened that entire interior of the line. And I thought that team is built for between the tackle running of Caleb Johnson. So I thought with your last pick in the 2nd round, I thought you might jump and take him there, but you took Shamar Turner. Good. I actually like that player. But that's what I thought. I said, okay, Caleb Johnson is going to go ahead because I know they want a running back.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand everything that you ran down and how you had your eye, and they probably just traded just back one pick too many, and that guy kept going ahead of
If you spend any time on Bears Twitter, number one, you'll see it is a glorious place to hang out sometimes. But, a lot of people out there would blame that on Ryan Poles' incompetence to not be prepared to trade up and go get those guys instead of having them taken right before he was. Like, he basically got, according to some people, he got outclassed and outsmarted by other teams who none of them traded ahead of us to get these guys. They were just there when those guys got picked. So I don't know how that makes Ryan Poles incompetent or unprepared, but according to some people on Bears Twitter, that's what happened last weekend.
I'm glad you brought up Ryan Poles because I wanted to ask you about him and this front office. Alex kind of mentioned the moves that they've made. What is the overall fan sentiment in Chicago about Ryan Poles right now? Because it kind of feels like maybe a mixed bag. You're a Chicago guy. You cover this team closely. You really have your hand on the pulse of what's going on in Bears country. So, when I look at this draft, I look at a guy that turned 7 picks into this year's draft into 8 players plus a future pick. Mm-hmm. Like we mentioned earlier, he's completely reshaped the interior of that O-line, trading for Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson, signing Drew Dahlman, which might be one of the most underrated moves, by the way. He's a terrific player. And then he even used what I thought was a great move with that 2025 second-round pick on tackle Ozzie Trapillo, who I think a very good player. What's the sentiment here? Is he winning over the fan base, or are people still kind of feeling torn about the job he's doing in Chicago right now?
Well, we're Bears fans, so we can't have nice things. And there's never going to be a consensus about Ryan Poles until he's standing on the podium hoisting a Lombardi trophy. Now, I've always been a huge supporter of his because he basically came in and started making the moves almost immediately that that I felt the Bears should be making. It was puzzling for a former offensive lineman in Ryan Poles to take the tack that he did with repairing the offensive line. He was kind of doing this offensive line by committee thing. Like, he was going out, signing a bunch of bodies, and then we're going to put our best 5 on the field. Whereas this offseason, he went out and got 3 studs and brought in guys that are going to push the rest of the depth chart down. Like, these are the guys, and everybody's fighting to play behind them. It's a philosophy we wish that Poles would have taken earlier, but for one reason or another, he didn't. And, now it's here, and it's even more necessary than before because we all know from Detroit that Ben Johnson's offense won't work if the offensive line is garbage. So that was priority 1 in getting the team fixed. And, there's always going to, like you heard me say a minute ago about everybody complaining about the running backs getting sniped because of his incompetence. And that was because Ryan Poles was not prepared and things like that. We got the guys that we got, but of course, everyone thought we should have gotten somebody else. We could have picked this guy here, and so on and so forth down the line in the draft. And it's, the guy, he's been on some kind of roller coaster, man, because as the season was drawing to a close, Shane Waldron had been fired, Matt Eberflus had been fired, and we're still losing football games and losing them badly after Eberflus got fired because the defense went in the toilet after he was gone. There was no one else left to blame at that point. So Ryan Poles was really, really under fire towards the end of the season. And there were rumors about Ben Johnson wanting to pick his own general manager or bring in his guy to work with. So if that was going to be the marriage, then Poles has got to go, and so on and so forth. But it's like, we hired Ben Johnson. He fully endorsed Ryan Poles and was looking forward to working with him. And then the offseason that he's had, he's kind of rebounded. So say he was like a presidential candidate, his approval rating, I believe, is above average and has been climbing. But as far as him being universally loved in Chicago, he's going to have to hoist the Lombardi before that happens, because people cannot just let the guy be or trust that the good things are going to happen. They're just going to sit there and ridicule him for the sake of doing it, or just so they can say, I told you so, when things go wrong. So
that's great to understand, because I didn't realize the sentiment that Ryan Poles, what the feeling of the fans were about Ryan Poles. I personally, I guess as an outsider looking in, I'm a Raiders fan, so as an outsider looking in, everything looks great to me because we've been just front offices look like crap. But looking at it, I'm like, okay, well, Chicago has always been this defensive-led first type of team and things that they do. So he's kind of bringing it into the 21st century with where the game is going with offense and kind of spreading it out and scoring a lot. So he kind of went in that direction heavy last year. And then obviously at the beginning, the first 2 rounds of this year as well, when you go get Caleb and then you go get Adunze and then you do all these things. So it's like going into a different direction opposed to what has been for the most part in the past. Now, adding in Ben Johnson, early on expectation, obviously this will change, so and we'll talk about it probably later on in the offseason, but early on expectation, obviously Sam Darnold is now gone. The Vikings, we don't know what that quarterback room is really going to look like over there if J.J. McCarthy's healthy. Detroit lost basically all of their coaches, so you know what happens when you lose coaches, especially offensive and defensive coordinators. We've seen Philly when what happened to them. What are you seeing there as opposed to in terms of how you guys have added the coach, you've added more offensive firepower in the draft and then as well in the offseason through free agency, revamping that offensive line. What is your early on expectation?
Well, we are the 3-time back-to-back offseason champs. And, in the first 2 seasons, optimism was high. There was hope and a lot of positivity going into the seasons. And then we were gloriously let down by our performance on the field in both of those seasons. So I think a lot of Bear fans are kind of protecting themselves for getting too overly excited because we've had tremendous off seasons for the last 2 years and we've got 12 wins out of 34 games to show for it. 7-10 in 2023, 5-12 with a 10-game losing streak towards the end of the season there. In 2024. And, it's like we got all excited for for them to come out and just look like they never played football before. And I think hope is high, but expectations is kind of where Bear fans are kind of tempering themselves right now. It's like I think everyone wants to see 9 or 10 wins or something like that. But with the talent that we've acquired, with the genius that is Ben Johnson, and I don't think anyone would be surprised if we actually managed to be like Washington and pull off a 12-win season, maybe even make a deep playoff run. But can you get a Bear fan to boldface tell you that that's what's going to happen right now? Probably not. No, and I'm not going to be that guy either, just because I was that guy for the last 2 years. And I had 7 wins in 2023 and 5 wins in 2024 to show for it. So we're more in a do it kind of phase with the Bears. And then we'll be over the moon excited if what we think will happen actually starts to happen. We're the only team trending up while everyone in the division is kind of trending down this offseason. Optimism is high, but as far as getting someone to go out on a limb right now, I think you'd be hard pressed to find a Bear fan who's just going to pound the table and say, yeah, we're going to have single-digit losses this year. We're going to win the division. We're going to make a deep playoff run and all that kind of stuff.
Larry, look, Bears fans might be feeling that way, but the American public clearly is all over the Bears because I don't know if you've seen BetMGM recently reported that the Chicago Bears are the most popular team to bet on to go over their season win total right now, with over 90% of the bets hitting the over. Look, clearly, like I said, Bears fans, they might not be that, quick to say, look, they're going to be this great team. But why do you think there's so much betting confidence in Chicago this year? Is it justified? Are the bettors getting ahead of themselves here? You do still have a fairly young team. There's a lot of new pieces, right? And you have a new coach. And even though people love the Ben Johnson hire and there's still a lot of hope for Caleb. We'll get into him in a second. But this team, America as a whole, is really on the Bears right now.
It's simple. It is simple. Most of America has no skin in the game. Like they throw a few dollars at the Bears. Yeah, they'll take their over. I completely understand that, your willingness to make that bet and the optimism that you might have, because on paper, it's a really sexy team. It absolutely is. And every Bear fan believes that as well. We believe we have the best team in the division, but we believed that last year and the year before, and we walked away empty-handed in both cases. For the first time in our 105-year history, we fired our head coach mid-season, and that's what we've had to endure going into this offseason with all this optimism and all this hope. And basically, we're kind of like the battered wives club over here with the Bears fan base. It's like we've been hurt before. We love this team, but we don't really trust them.
Hey, so what I hear, Bears fans, we tried to get Larry to give us something. He wouldn't give it. Great job, Larry. Great applause right there, Brad. Great job. But To follow back up, so let's look at it from a different way then. How about this? What is, with everything that you've done, what is your expectation to see from Ben Johnson and Caleb? Because we know that this is a quarterback-driven league.
Mm-hmm.
As much as we don't want to say you want to talk about all the other aspects, we know most of these teams, just in terms of how we've seen over the past maybe 10 to 15 years, with Brady and everything kind of starts at that quarterback. And if he can make plays and if you have a coach that can scheme something up. So now with an offensive mind like Ben Johnson and now Caleb, who we know has the talent. So now looking at it, what is your expectation from them? Again, not wins and losses, just like what are you hoping to see with the weapons that you have, with the revamped offensive line, and now with Ben and Caleb in tow? What do you expect to see from that tandem?
One word: competency. Competency. I mean, it's been downright embarrassing at times to watch the Bears, especially on the offensive side of the ball. We come out in 2023, we got DJ Moore, we got a real offensive weapon, a receiver for Justin to go along with Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet. And, we've got some weapons for Justin, and it's going to be a lot better. We looked good in the preseason and high hopes. We're starting week 1 against Green Bay. We lost that game 38-10. We got absolutely run off our own field week 1. By Green Bay. It was embarrassing. Jordan Love, his first start in the Bears-Packers rivalry, just literally picking up where Rodgers left off. So fast forward to 2024. We got Caleb. We went out and got Keenan Allen. We drafted Roma Dunze. We got a new offensive coordinator in Shane Waldron. Luke Getsy and his nonsense, get him out of here. Okay, we bring in Shane Waldron. We were the world champions of the preseason, undefeated, beating everybody by 20 points or more in those 4 games we played. Week 1, we come out against the Titans, and it was like, what happened? What happened? Where did the offense go? I mean, all of a sudden, we can't block for anybody. We can't score any points. We didn't score a touchdown in that game. If not for Tyreek Stevenson's pick 6 at the end of the game, we scored 0 touchdowns in that game. And it kept going on and on and on. And the offensive line's falling apart, and we're making short yardage calls. We're going for it on 4th and 1, so we got the stones to do that. But then you call the worst play call that you can make, or we're throwing those bubble screens where the receiver is catching the ball 4 yards behind the line of scrimmage. So it's not 4th and 1, it's 4th and 5, because that's how many he's got to get a first down, and so on and so forth. You would think, and it always kind of seemed to be the case that no matter what team the Bears are playing, we got outcoached by the guy on the other sideline. And with Ben Johnson being out there and the things that he's been doing with Detroit, we think we finally have the smartest guy in the room. And not someone who's going to, like Matt Nagy, who always had to show he was the smartest guy in the room, but someone who actually is the smartest guy in the room. So we add that, the strength of the offensive line that we've built up with the best guard in football, and then a guy who had his best days playing for Ben Johnson, along with the best center available on the market this year, to go along with a good tackle in Darnell Wright. And then we'll figure out what's going on with the left. Is it going to be Trapillo, or is Braxton Jones going to be healthy enough to start week 1? And we've added Colston Loveland to bookend with Cole Kmet. We just want to see competency. Just want to see them look good playing the game, because the Bears have had what I like to call a lot of but victories over the last several years. It's like, yeah, we won, but like that week 1 game against the Titans. Yeah, we won, but the offense had like 90 yards total offense throughout the entire football game. And if not for a special teams block punt and a pick 6, we lose this game handily to the Tennessee Titans. And there was a lot of but in those wins over the last several years, especially with Eberflus at the helm. We want to get rid of the but victories and just be like, yeah, we won, period.
It did feel like they had a lot of close losses too. And some of those could be turned around this season. Not to bring up bad memories, but that horrible Hail Mary, of course, against Washington, and some really tough losses that they took there that kind of turned the season in the wrong direction for them. I think bringing in a coach like this, bringing in some of this better supporting cast around this young quarterback, I expect big things for him and this offense, because to your point, I thought the offensive play calling, the offensive philosophy in general, and the dysfunction in the coaching staff, I thought really held this young quarterback back. And it really kind of felt like a wasted year 1 in a lot of ways, unfortunately, for Caleb Williams, because, look, I'm not selling my Caleb Williams stock. And if you listen to the national media, they'd have you believe that this guy is an absolute bomb. I love what they've done here. What are the expectations here for Caleb Williams? Didn't live up to maybe the expectations for year one. So what are the expectations now for him specifically? We talked about the team, but what are the fan base? What are they hoping to see from him this year with Ben Johnson and some of these new offensive pieces?
Well, before I answer that real quick, the thing about the front office and the moves that they're making for the first time in, I can't even remember how long, the front office leaned into what made that head coach hireable. And for example, when we brought in Matt Eberflus, Jalen Carter was there to be had in the first round. Now, I will say that I did not want the Bears to draft Jalen Carter. I thought he was a character problem, that it was going to be an issue, that the Bears didn't have the mixture of veterans and youth to wrangle that guy in. I don't think it would have worked out in Chicago. But Matt Eberflus was in his first year. He was a defensive guy, and for his defensive system, you needed a 3-technique tackle to plug up the middle. During the entire time that Eberflus was in Chicago, that never happened. That never happened. And even as well as the defense performed at times, we never had that solid 3-technique guy. So we got Ben Johnson. Here he comes. He's the offensive guy. He's the offensive guru. He had a 2 tight end system in Detroit. So what do? We go out and get what the Bears regard to be the best tight end in the draft to go along with Cole Kmet as well. We go and draft the offensive line to strengthen that offensive unit with Trapillo in the second round and trading for Tooney and Jackson and signing Dahlman. We're leaning into what made Ben Johnson, and, the myth and the legend that he was in Detroit and why everybody wanted him in Chicago. Now, what does that mean for Caleb? That means he's flying without a net this year. He's all out of excuses. Last year was horrendous. 2 head coaches, 3 play callers, an offensive line that served more like a swinging gate than anything else. Sacked 68 times in 17 games, and he avoided another 50 sacks. I saw some wild stat. I think it was on PFF or something like that. He was number 1 in the league, getting out of 50 additional sacks to the 68 where he was brought down. And I think number 2 was like Jalen Hurts with like 12 or something like that. I mean, it was an enormous disparity about other players finding time in the backfield for the Bears. With the offensive line seemingly solidified, especially in the middle, which is the shortest route to the quarterback, the additional weapons, the genius that is Ben Johnson, he needs to make that second-year leap. He needs to. Those are the expectations. That what he did last year, he really did a lot of things that showed what made him generational. At times, it was frustrating watching him hang on to the ball, but this was a guy that, I think he threw for over 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 6 interceptions for the worst offense in football. And it's like, it wasn't because of him that we were terrible. He was doing his best to stop the bleeding, to slow the bleeding this year. And now he's been put in a position where he's actually going to get to play instead of playing street ball for 60 minutes, because everything that we plan to do, we can't because the offensive line folded in the middle, and here they come, and he's just off there, playing off script every single play. So the expectation is that there's going to be a lot more competence. The offensive line is going to be able to block for him, so he'll be able to actually make his reads and make his throws and show everyone why he was the hands down, can't pass this guy number 1 overall pick last year.
So let's switch over to the defensive side. I know you spoke a little bit about the defense and everything like that. The expectation on that side, because I thought they were holding their own, obviously, in the beginning of the season, but as they were on, you have to have the offense at some time help you out. I love your defensive backfield. Like, I think Jalen Johnson, Kyle Gordon, I love the pick of Zah Frazier as well. But then up front, the addition of Grady Jarrett, I'm looking at a top 10 defense. My expectation, obviously Shamar Turner in the rotation there as well. You do, and Andrew Billings, who people don't talk about a lot of these plays because they don't show up in the stat sheet. But Andrew Billings has made quite the career out of just being a solid player. He's never going to show up in your stat sheet. You're never going to see him in the Pro Bowl or any type of all-pro player, but he just simply is big, is huge, does his job stuffing the run and just holding at the point of attack. That's people don't understand. That's hard to find. Ex-Cowboy fans, they're literally still looking for that right now. So you have all these pieces. Obviously, Tremaine Edmonds has become the stalwart in the middle, and that vaunted middle linebacker role that you guys have for years just simply replenished and had a guy there. You move on from Roquan, obviously there. And then even on the weak side with TJ Edwards, again, another guy who's probably not going to show up a lot in terms of all pros and Pro Bowls, anything like that, but a guy that simply just consistently does his job. I love the way the defense is set up in turn for Caleb. Because if he does make a mistake, because he is still going to have to learn a new offense, so we know that probably the first 4 games, we know how that goes. Nobody's been playing in preseason. It's going to be a little bit bumpy in the beginning. But there's a defense there that's played together, and you're adding more pieces to it. And Dennis Allen, who I think is a very good DC, you now bring him in with all these weapons. I'm looking at this defense as a top 10 defense. Potential, let's just say, for discussion's sake, potential top 10 defense.
Yeah, it's almost, and it just is going to sound funny to hear me say, it's almost a shame that Tremaine Edmonds didn't get hurt last year, because I definitely think he could be like a comeback player of the year type candidate. Because you say that Andrew Billings and what he does doesn't show up on the stat sheet. I wholeheartedly disagree, because look at our ranking against the run before he got hurt against Arizona, and then look at it for the second half of the season without him. And Tremaine Edmonds took a beating for the rest of the season because there was nobody there to protect him. He was more catching people as they ran past him than he was getting up to the line of scrimmage and making tackles and things like that. As far as his play, because he wasn't as protected as he was when Billings was out there, he had a terrible season last year. And you're right, TJ Edwards, he was absolutely everywhere and earned that extension. And after 2 seasons, Tremaine Edmonds is looking like a free agent bust. We're paying this guy $18 million a season, and we're not getting $18 million worth of production out of him. We know he's capable of more, but the defense and what happened, it became a combination of these guys are on the field for 40 minutes a game, and guys started getting hurt. We lost Jaquan Brisker early in the season. Andrew Billings got hurt. Montez Sweat missed a couple of games here and there, and he was playing hurt with a nagging injury for most of the season. We didn't have anybody on the other side, so Montez Sweat was getting all of the attention. So it was a combination of all of those things that caused the defense to dip. And then we lost Eberflus after the Lions game, and Eric Washington was no Matt Eberflus as far as helping the defense cook. But with Dennis Allen coming in, we got Odengbo from Indianapolis to, be the other guy on the other side from Montez Sweat, bringing in Grady Jarrett. I'm interested what the Bears are going to do with Gervon Dexter, because he showed up to minicamp like 30 pounds lighter than he was at the end of last season. And Dennis Allen's like his defensive ends on the bigger side, like 260, 270 and such. Maybe they're thinking about moving him to the outside, to be a defensive end, because he looked a little too skinny to be a guy in the middle like he was before. I mean, that's what made, I think, drafting Shamar Turner as essential as it was to take him over like Caleb Johnson with that second round pick. So to see Jarrett could come in, Andrew Billings come back healthy, Jaquan Brisker is healthy and he's going to play. God hope that, he can make it through the year and that he doesn't play so wild that he hurts himself again. Hopefully Kevin Byard can hold off Father Time for another year, and then Jalen Johnson and Kyler Gordon are going to cook. And I'm hoping that Al Harris, our new defensive backs coach, can get Tyreek Stevenson's head right, because he's got all the talent in the world, but he just could not get out of his own way last year. All of those things, if you put them in the pot and mix them up together, hopefully that's going to be a unit that returns to top 10 status.
So Larry, like I mentioned, you've got your hand on the pulse of this team. You're very dialed in with everything that's going on with the Chicago Bears. So I want to ask you, what is with all the DJ Moore trade rumors that I keep hearing? What's really going on with DJ Moore? I mean, this guy is a veteran, a guy who can do a little bit of everything, only 28 years old, very productive, very physical, and a scheme versatile guy. So I have no reason to believe that he won't fit with what Ben Johnson wants to do. Yeah. He's the 11th highest paid wide receiver, but he ranks 6th in production since 2018. So why am I hearing this buzz here about Chicago considering moving on from him? Is this attitude related? Does it come back to the quote unquote, he quit on Caleb in the team rumors. Because look, I know it has nothing to do about savings, because the Bears would actually eat $9 million just to move him. So what's your thoughts here? What are you hearing about this situation?
I think it's clickbait, number one, because, you don't sign a guy to the highest contract in franchise history only to sell him away for a year later. That's just not going to happen. And because we drafted Luther Burden when we didn't need another wide receiver, Luther Burden is widely considered to be a luxury pick for the Bears because we have Rome Odunze. We already had a DJ Moore. We signed Zacchaeus away from the Commanders. We had Duvernay, Miles Boykin. We've got bodies at wide receiver, and Tyler Scott, who we drafted a couple of years ago, never got a chance with Luke Getsy or Shane Waldron. Somebody I'd love to see if he can maybe do something with himself, with a competent guy calling the plays. And, I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't know where it's coming from. That whole he quit on Caleb thing was put to bed, in my opinion, by DJ during the season. And it was overall frustration, period. It wasn't a Caleb thing. And it wasn't, because I heard those rumors during the season last year. It's nonsense. It's all nonsense. DJ's not going anywhere. Ben Johnson's chomping at the bit to be able to use him along with everybody else. And that's what I'm most excited about when it comes to Ben Johnson, because if you have a pulse and you're on the active roster on game day, he's going to use you. So I don't think that there's going to be any kind of conversation like with Shane Waldron or with Luke Getsy, where we're having conversations like, where is Cole Kmet? Where is DJ Moore? Why are we not throwing him the football? How are we not scheming a way to get the ball to the best player we have on the field? Ben Johnson's not going to be that guy. He's not going to be that guy where you can't figure out why this person's not getting used. It's not going to be an issue. I mean, if Dan Skipper is catching touchdown passes for the Lions, it's because everybody else has had a chance to do it as well. I mean, he was going to have Penei Sewell throw a pass against the Bears on a tackle sweep pass play on Thanksgiving. This is what Ben Johnson does. If you're on the field, he's going to use you, and that's why I'm looking forward to this. I see a lot more ball being spread around as opposed to Caleb locking in on one guy because he's the only one that's getting open because the OC can't find a way to get the other guys schemed open. So the DJ Moore thing, I'd never put any weight into it. It confuses and it angers me that there are those rumors out there, and that anybody would give them any weight is just foolish, in my opinion.
When you get the proverbial Dan Skipper a scouting report, you have an offensive coordinator that's using every trick in the book and every opportunity to put the ball in the end zone.
Yeah. Which is why I thought he might go for Tyler Warren over Colston Loveland, because Tyler Warren is that jack of all trades kind of guy, but he liked Loveland, who's a better route runner and I guess more in line with what he's looking for, like more of a Sam Laporta kind of guy.
We've talked about this rookie class, but I want to go a little deeper here because we've got a Bears expert on the show. So why not? Let's talk about some undrafted free agents, because look, when you go around the league, you look at these rosters, it's amazing how many guys end up being impact players in this league who were never even drafted. We see it on every roster every single year across the NFL. But which undrafted free agents right now are the Bears fans most excited about? And I'll point out one personally that I'm circling here, and I'm curious your thoughts, Larry. I'm curious about Xavier Carlton, the edge from Cal. This guy's a former 4-star recruit, put up 11 tackles for a loss and 9 sacks last year, a productive player that can be disruptive in the backfield. Could he be a sleeper to watch in camp? And if not him, who are some guys that you're circling?
Well, I mean, it seems to be a philosophy that the Bears have changed this year, because Bear fans were terrified, absolutely terrified that defensive end that the Bengals drafted, potential overproduction. And the Bears have been guilty of doing that, especially when it comes to defensive players. And, Xavier Carlton represents production over traits. This is a guy that actually went out there and did it. 11 tackles for loss, 9 sacks on a season. So that's, to me, that kind of speaks to the philosophy being changed, or maybe that's Ben Johnson's influence. It's like, I don't care what you think the guy can do. I want to know what he has done. Like when Ben Johnson was being asked about the possibility of drafting Will Campbell and if short arms were going to be an issue for him, he came out and said, I watched the tape first, not knowing any of the measurables, because I just want to know if the guy can play. I want to know if he goes out there and he's productive on the field. Does he do his job? Then we can worry about him having 32.5-inch arms versus 33.5 or whatever number Campbell measured out to be. you want to see if the guy can go out there and get it done on the field and then worry about his 40 time and things like that. Carlton represents that production over traits thing. Another guy that Bear fans are kind of interested in is another production over traits guy in Tysheem Johnson, the safety from Oregon, because this guy always seemed to be around the ball, batting it down or making interceptions. Not to mention we have not that we have a solid as far as players are concerned with Kevin Byard and Brisker. Brisker hasn't played a lot of football in the last 2 seasons because of concussion issues and things like that, which is why, like, if there was a hole in the Bears draft board, there was no safety taken in the draft to kind of prepare for what history says is inevitable with Jaquan Brisker missing time for one reason or another. To have somebody to fill in behind him. And Tysheem Johnson seems like one of those guys. So that's another one that Bear fans are kind of looking at.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought him up because he's a guy that I got to watch closely. Actually got to watch him live being out here in Oregon and covering that team close. He's a ball hawk and a guy that's productive. Like you said, racking up 5 interceptions in the last 2 seasons. So very, very under the radar player that I think could be a value pick there. So we talked about rookies. We talked about undrafted free agents. I want to ask you about some potential breakout candidates. Some of those guys that are maybe going into year 2, maybe going into year 3, still young guys that could maybe be difference makers, maybe take that leap and become impact players for the Bears this season. And I'll point out one name I'm really curious about to get your thoughts on is Austin Booker, the edge defender out of Kansas. This is a guy that I had pegged as a draft sleeper last year. We didn't see him on the field a whole bunch in 2024, but could he be one of those potential breakout guys who maybe earns a bigger role in 2025? And if not him, who are some guys that you're circling?
I'm looking forward to seeing what a guy like Tyler Scott, and he was not used, and at times when he did get an opportunity, mostly during his rookie year when you're expected to make mistakes, he didn't step up in those moments. I don't think he was really active for many games last year. Maybe Elijah Hicks, he played a lot of football last year because of Brisker being out and Austin Booker. What do they do with Zach Pickens now, especially if my theory is correct and Gervon Dexter is going to move to defensive end? There's a guy going into year 3 that I'm very interested to see what he's going to do, especially if he's going to go through a position change like some people think he will. With a better offensive line, how effective as a short yardage runner does Roschon Johnson become? People like that I'm very interested to see, how they're going to be able to step up. Like Tyreek Stevenson. Does having somebody like Al Harris being his coach, who, number one, has a sterling reputation as far as developing guys and also is a no-nonsense kind of guy that will hold a guy like Tyreek Stevenson accountable and get his head right so that his talent can be used on the field instead of being a pariah off of it like he was after the Washington game.
So before we wrap here, let's have some fun.
Sure.
All of the Chicago Bears historically are in a draft. Mm-hmm. And you happen to have, let's just play some Madden here for a moment. You have the number 1 and number 2 pick of current and past Chicago Bears players. Give me an offensive player and a defensive player that you draft in the top with those first 2.
Okay. Well, with the first pick in this fantasy draft of mine, you take the greatest player of all time in Walter Payton, because Walter Payton was one of one. There has been no one like before him, no one like since him. Go back and watch a Walter Payton highlight reel, and you would think he was mad at the turf the way that this guy ran. He ran like a savage, absolute beast. And he was 5'11". He barely weighed 200 pounds. He was a monster of a football player, and there wasn't anything he couldn't do. He actually played a game of quarterback for the Bears and threw 2 touchdown passes against the New Orleans Saints back in like 83, something like that. I was in attendance when he broke Jim Brown's rushing record back in 84. Yes, I am that old.
Nice.
Yeah, I was there for that. And there was nobody in the world like him, and no one has ever run the way that he did. He ran angry all the time. And you can only imagine the rushing stats he would have put together if he'd have had the offensive line he played for the last 4 or 5 years of his career. He had at the beginning of his career, he'd have rushed for over 20,000 yards. He'd have a record that even Emmett wouldn't have been able to touch. And on the defensive side, the number 2 pick, I'd probably have to look at somebody like an Urlacher or a Singletary, or maybe even go up front with today's NFL and maybe a Richard Dent, because there's never been a better pass rusher in Bears history. Probably go somewhere in that area. Sweetness I don't even need to think about that one. But the number 2 pick, either go, the Chicago way and find the middle linebacker. And frankly, I think Urlacher would probably be the best choice.
Yeah, I agree for today's NFL.
His overall athleticism,
right? Nothing.
And I think he was the best athlete of the bunch.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, he was the safety / kick returner at New Mexico before he came to Chicago and became a Hall of Fame middle linebacker. So probably be like an Urlacher or a Richard Dent or maybe even a Dan Hampton, because he was a guy that moved up and down the defensive line. So he had versatility and things like that. There's a lot of choices
right
there with that number 2 pick, but I'd probably go with like an Urlacher or somebody like that.
Yeah, I figured you'd probably go middle linebacker, and I was thinking, I didn't know if you were going to go old school, because my first thought was that I'd have to do Urlacher. With the way these tight ends are all over the field, you need that type of long ass guy that can cover and be multiple in sets.
He had such range, man. It was scary what he could do out there, and he terrified opposing offenses. It's like you always have to know where 54 is, or you have to know what area he's in, because trust me, he can close the gap and get where you didn't think he could,
right,
and make a play he had no business making. That's why he was first ballot Hall of Fame material, because he never ceased to impact every defensive coordinator or offensive coordinator that he played against. It's like if Urlacher's out there, we have to know where he is every single second.
Yeah, guys, and make sure to direct your hate at BTU_Larry for not mentioning Dick Butkus on his top picks here. I just want to mention at BTU_Larry once again, neglecting arguably the greatest Bear of all time. You guys can let him hear about it at Twitter, of course. But no, Larry, this has been absolutely awesome, man. Thanks for coming on the show. Once again, guys, go check out his show. He is Larry Dyer, the host of the Bears Talk Underground podcast, part of the Radcast Network, of course. It's an award-winning Chicago Bears podcast, and I'm sure listening to this one, you can tell why. Check it out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. It is a great listen. Larry, thanks again for being on the show.
My pleasure, guys. And the guys that I picked were healthy and on the field almost all of the time, whereas Dick Butkus, God bless him, played hurt the majority of his career. So
fight back,
as
Larry.
the great John, the best ability to have is availability. And Dick Butkus, God bless him, as mean and menacing and terrifying as that guy was, and as good as he was, he played hurt, and he was hurt, and he missed games, and his career was short because of it. Sweetness missed one game in a 13-year career. Urlacher didn't miss many more than that in his 13-year career. So you got to go with the guys you can count on, and I can count on Sweetness. I can count on Urlacher to be on the field every Sunday, no matter what. I rest my case.
Thanks for listening to the Pint Glass Football Podcast. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter at PGF Podcast.